for example number 1, they want us to compute all 6 trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant of the following. So the first thing I need to do is identify the sides of the triangle. So this is my angle, theta. So immediately this is the opposite. How do I know it's the opposite? It's across from theta. The one across from the 90-degree angle is the hypotenuse. We don't know what that is yet. We'll have to find that. And then the one left over is the adjacent. Okay. So remember that the hypotenuse is C. Remember that the adjacent, now this one doesn't matter. We could call this A or we could call this B or vice versa, but C always has to be the hypotenuse. So the first thing I need to do is figure out what the hypotenuse is based on the information they've given us. So I say A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Well, what's A? X times the square root of 2. And then I'm going to square that whole thing. Plus B, which is 4x. Again, I'm going to square that whole thing, and that's equal to C squared. Well, then this is interesting. So when you square a square root, you're left with the base. In other words, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2. I also have to square x, so I get x squared. And then over here, I'm going to end up with, when I square the 4, I get 16. And then x squared is just x. Think of 4x times 4x. And that is equal to C squared. Combine like terms, I get 18x squared equals C squared. Now the next step, algebraically, is I need to take the square root of both sides. So then I end up with the square root of 18 times the square root of x squared equals C. Well, the square root of x squared is just x. And then I have to reduce this. Remember that 3 squared is equal to 9, and that 9 times 2 equals 18. In other words, I could split this up into the square root of 3. Oh, not 3. Getting ahead of myself. The square root of 9 times the square root of 2. That's the properties of radicals. Okay. And then the square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of 2 times x is C. So I did all that math to determine that this is 3 square root of 2 times x. And I put a little tail on my square root symbol. So now what does that mean? Well, sine of theta is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the opposite is just 4x all over the hypotenuse, which is 3, the square root 2, x. And for argument's sake, we would rationalize the denominator, which means we have to multiply both the top and bottom by the square root of 2. But for today, I'm just going to skip that, just so you guys can get the hang of plugging in the numbers. So then cosine of theta is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And so that would be, I'm going to write it this way though, the square root of 2 times x all over the hypotenuse, which is 3 root 2 of x. Now this simplifies actually. This will cancel with this, and I'm left with 1 over 3. Actually, when I think about it, this cancels with this. So we're left with, we'll do that, 4 over 3 root 2. And then tangent of theta is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. And so the opposite would be 4x all over the adjacent, which is the square root of 2x. The x's cancel, and I just get 4 over the square root of 2. Again, normally we would rationalize this denominator. Mr. Adams is just going to skip that for now because I just want you to figure out how to plug stuff in. Okay. And then the rest you would just plug in. All right. We're running out of time.